Throughout the 20th century, virtually nothing was known about the values, preferences, or insights of African people. Experts, intellectual elites, media pundits, and politicians purported to know what we thought. Even as political openings began to transform the continent in the 1990s, conventional wisdom held that we were focused on economic and social development and didn't care much about democracy or human rights. Against this backdrop, Afrobarometer emerged quietly. Conceived in South Africa and born in Ghana, the brainchild of three professors who envisioned a world in which Africa's development is anchored in the realities and aspirations of its people.
Sometime in 1998, Mike Bratton, Bob Martis, and I met in South Africa for a conference. We were talking among ourselves and discovered that the three of us were conducting opinion surveys. So Mike was conducting opinion surveys in Zimbabwe and Bob in South Africa, and I was doing that in Ghana. We thought, well, it would be a good idea to do this systematically and comparatively, so that we get a sense of things. And this was particularly interesting to us because we were at a conference on African democratization, and we realized that up to that point, we only had assumptions and presumptions about what ordinary Africans thought about the economic and political liberalization reforms that were going on in their countries, especially the democratic reforms.
Afrobarometer started in 1999 mainly as an academic exercise, but the overall vision or purpose of the project was to ensure that the voices of ordinary Africans was not lost in policy discourse. Since then, Afrobarometer has collected, analyzed, and disseminated information about citizen priorities, preferences, and their experiences of governance on the African continent. And we've done this consistently in the past 25 years.
Over the next quarter century, Afrobarometer would write a new African story, giving voice to millions once unheard. Building a pan-African network of researchers, Afrobarometer would become a beacon, guiding governments and policy actors, carrying the experiences, concerns, and hopes of ordinary people to decision makers around the globe. Like most great things, we started small. In 1999, the idea of polling African citizens seemed impossible, even laughable to many observers. Professors Michael Bratton, E. Jima Bwedi, and Robert Mattis were not deterred.
Again, the misperception out there amongst people who had the money to provide assistance for surveys was that Africans won't tell you their opinions, right? So that you need to do more participant observation type of research, anthropological type of research, rather than questionnaire surveys.
When Afrobarometer was getting started, a lot of people thought that it didn't make sense to do this kind of research in Africa, that Africans wouldn't be interested, that they wouldn't sort of mesh with the methodology.
Well, when we applied for funding for our concept of undertaking opinion surveys in African countries, some of the people who reviewed the application for the National Science Foundation and others that we applied to were quite dismissive. They dismissed the application on the grounds that everybody knows what Africans think. Secondly, it was impossible anyway, given the African terrain.
Merging independent research projects from Michigan State University, the Institute for Democratic Alternatives in South Africa, and the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, they completed the first survey in 12 countries, from Botswana and South Africa to Ghana and Nigeria in 2001. Their first data set proved that Africans can be scientifically polled just like people in other regions of the world, and debunked the notion that Africans are indifferent to democratic governance.
And again, I think, our very first round of surveys just stood that on its head and showed you that people are quite, willing to engage and to think about politics in a serious way and express their opinions.
Being able to do 12 countries, clean the data set, get it ready for analysis was a big vindication. It was a big validation of our concept that Africans could be surveyed, African opinions could be sampled in the same way that is done in other regions of the world.
Well, we discovered a widespread hunger for democratic governance. I mean, like people anywhere, Africans wish to choose their leaders and they wish to live freely, especially under a system that you might describe as democracy.
Building on its initial success, Afrobarometer extended its reach in the early 2000s, entering a growth phase that continues to this day. As researchers from across the continent joined in, we expanded our surveys to 16 countries in round 2 and 18 countries in round 3 in 2005 and 2006. Having 3 data points from round 1 to 3 allowed us to start doing trend analysis, an important milestone for tracking the evolution of African views over time. Determined to nurture the next generation of African researchers, we also launched our first summer school in 2004, as capacity building became a key pillar of our mission. Offering reliable scientific data and analyses, Afrobarometer began entering the spotlight across the continent and beyond. Whether in a prominent story in The Economist, a Best Dataset Award from the American Political Science Association, or the publication of our first book, Public Opinion, Democracy and Market Reform in Africa.
Afrobarometer has always wanted to do trend analysis to understand trends in public opinion and to help shape policy. It was important to look not just at a single point in time, but to really understand attitudes and perspectives and how they were evolving over time, especially as countries introduced more democratic processes and people became more familiar with those processes over time. One of the key points on that is that you can't do trend analysis until you have 3 data points. We're always very careful about not taking 2 points as a trend, because events and things that occur on the ground can cause attitudes to change in the short term, going up or down in the short term. Since round 3, which was in 2005 to 2006, we've been able to do trend analysis in a growing number of countries over time. And now we have countries that we can look at for 10 or even 20 years, 25 years for some countries.
The threshold of Afrobarometer data being usable, being amenable to cross-time analysis, trend analysis. And the way we knew, we realized we have arrived was that The Economist magazine decided to feature the Afrobarometer findings in its May or June edition of the magazine. It was basically an acknowledgement that there is now a data set, empirical data set, that can be analyzed to get a sense of African opinions on things around them, things about their lives, things about economic reforms and the political reforms that were taking place around them. So that was a major milestone.
The next steps would be a quantum leap in survey coverage and an ambitious journey toward Africanization and sustainability. In 2008, co-founder and executive director Bratton passed the leadership torch to Jima Buedi, who oversaw a 20-country round 4 survey carrying on Afrobarometer's zero tolerance for error standards. Partners took responsibility for oversight and support to national partners in all surveyed countries. The Institute for Development Studies at the University of Nairobi for East Africa, the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation for Southern Africa, and the Ghana Center for Democratic Development for West and North Africa.
I'm Winnie Mitula. I'm based at the Institute for Development Studies, University of Nairobi. I worked with Afrobarometer for about 17 years, coming in as a reviewer and then eventually becoming part of the team, managing the process and a director for the Eastern African region. So really, it's been wonderful engaging in that process. The earlier phases of Afrobarometer was a little bit difficult, in particular accessing policymakers. But for the other stakeholders like civil society, international development partners that are located within our region, in particular in Nairobi, it was very easy to access them. We even sometimes did disseminate jointly with them, where they convene and they kind of host the convening.
As one of the founding core partners of Afrobarometer, we are proud of the role we have played as co-parents in bringing Afrobarometer to where it is today. As the standard bearer of opinion polling in Africa, contributing to bringing African voices and African perspectives into the halls of policy making across the continent. And we proudly congratulate all of the members of the Afrobarometer board, of the management and of the staff of Afrobarometer for this wonderful achievement these 25 years.
Afrobarometer in the past 5 years became a legal entity under the dynamic leadership of Joe Asunka. It's been wonderful to see how it has thrived and innovated during this new phase of its existence. The Institute for Justice and Reconciliation has joined Afrobarometer as its regional co-partner for Southern Africa, as well as its national partner for South Africa in 2012. With its vision of building fair, democratic, inclusive and peaceful societies in Africa, there has since the inception of this partnership been a strong value alignment between us. We remain as proud today as when we were back then, when we joined this proudly African initiative. We celebrate with you and recommit with you to work towards providing a voice for Africans here and on the global stage in years to come. Congratulations, Afrobarometer.
I'm here to say a big congratulations to Afrobarometer for celebrating the 25 years of providing data and a voice to African citizens, and more so for providing data to assist in evidence-led policy making within the Eastern Africa region and within the Africa region in general. I am saying this simply because Afrobarometer has become the place to go, especially when one is interested in objective data to help in thinking issues about governance and social development in the African continent, and in particular all the countries that are involved. We, as the core partner for the Eastern African region, and I'm specifically talking about the University of Nairobi Institute for Development Studies that is responsible for the Eastern Africa region, are very happy to have been associated with the Afrobarometer close to 2 decades, providing data and providing voice to African citizens.
Showcasing the capabilities of African leadership and African partners, we reached another milestone with a daring leap from 20 countries to 35 countries in round 5 in 2011 to 2013, followed by 36 countries in round 6 about 2 years later. This phase also introduced a rolling year-round release of our findings and analysis, enhancing our relevance, visibility, and prestige as a key resource for African research and policy making. These expansions weren't just about increasing numbers, they were about building the narrative of a continent. They confirmed that as a Pan-African network, we possess the requisite talent, creativity, and drive to aim high and to succeed. As we continued to welcome new countries into our fold in round 6, we pursued growth on other fronts as well. A new website made our findings more accessible to all, enriched with media content. Our Pan-Africa profiles captured the essence of the continent's diverse voices. Our field teams embraced the digital age, trading paper for electronic tablets.
Technology has come to enhance Afrobarometer's work significantly. When we started in 1999, what we call the first round or round 1, we started off with pen and paper. But in round 7, we moved from paper and pen to computer-aided data capture. At that point, the introduction of technology allowed us to improve in many ways. First of all, the speed of data collection, the extent to which we had quality control measures in place, as well as the cleaning processes were all fast-tracked once we introduced technology. And so Afrobarometer's data collection, cleaning, and analysis, and the overall turnaround time of getting data to a good standard has been improved significantly since we introduced technology into the process of data collection. And of course, our cleaning protocols as well as quality control efforts have been enhanced with the use of technology in our data collection and in the entire value chain of Afrobarometer production.
All of our operations are managed centrally. We do programming of the questionnaire centrally, but it is in a uniform way that everyone is able to conduct the same questionnaire in each country without having a physical copy of the questionnaire.
I think we can look forward to Afrobarometer continuing to innovate on the types of products that we are sharing with the world. For example, one of the products that I'm currently working on personally is creating a new package of publications called Methods Notes that will help us to explore different methodological issues and help us to take the project to the next level.
By early 2016, we found ourselves sought after by the policy community, earning accolades and gearing up confidently for our round 7 survey spanning 34 countries. Then a key funder withdrew its support, citing a change in priorities. This plunged us into a severe financial crisis, posing an existential threat to our organization. But even as we planned for painful cuts, our old friends and some new ones rallied to our aid, offering generous financial, in-kind and symbolic support. Among our long-standing allies, Sweden increased its funding commitment to Afrobarometer for the next 5 years, setting an example for other funders to follow. USAID and the US State Department pooled resources across multiple departments to support our work.
Fundraising was done to the best of our ability. The Open Society Foundation's president met me on the sidelines of Mo Ibrahim Africa Governance Weekend meeting or event in Morocco and expressed a lot of admiration for the Afrobarometer and said he and others that he knew were avid users of the data and that they find it a great resource for African development and wanted to help us.
Expanding our base of support, we welcome new allies such as the Hewlett Foundation and the Open Society Foundations, or OSF, under the leadership of Chris Stone, whose generous contribution for institutional support greatly enhanced our organizational capabilities. The National Endowment for Democracy provided crucial bridge funding to fortify our operational capacity. Individual friends of Afrobarometer also played heroic roles in our time of need. The late Peter da Costa, the late Kofi Blankson Okanse, and the late Ozias Tongurua, along with Ambassador Johnny Carson and Professor Larry Diamond, lent their voices in support to our cause. Mo Ibrahim and Akwesi Edu, among others, used their influence to garner support from global platforms and philanthropic foundations. Through this crisis, we learned that opportunity could emerge from adversity and that our work holds great value for many. The unwavering commitment of our supporters served as a resounding vote of confidence in our mission, allowing us to enter round 8 with renewed purpose as we celebrated 2 decades of work and impact. To ensure Afrobarometer's success in its 3rd decade and beyond, we recognize the need to transition from an organic network to a robust, sustainable institution. In 2019, we incorporated as an independent corporate entity, giving Afrobarometer a solid legal foundation and increased autonomy. We restructured the Afrobarometer Board of Directors to enhance its effectiveness in overseeing our mission, evaluating our performance, and ensuring accountability and integrity across all operations. We also established the International Advisory Council, a vital source of strategic intelligence whose prestigious and diverse members help us forge connections with high-level policymakers and potential funders. In 2019, Afrobarometer achieved another milestone with the successful transition from our founding leadership to the next generation. Joseph Asunka became our CEO, and Jima Buedi retired from day-to-day management to take over as board chair.
So what made the transition successful? So as I keep saying, it's all about the transparency and the inclusivity of the process. We needed to make sure that everybody that mattered in the network was included in the process. And we were transparent about the objectives. Everybody bought into it. In fact, we all agreed what we were all achieving in the end. We had support from donors, but also involvement of relevant external expertise, moderating the whole process and guiding us.
The new management team soon faced an enormous challenge, the COVID-19 pandemic. In March 2020, we had to suspend all fieldwork activities, halting our progress halfway through round 8. We used the pause to refine our work procedures and explore the use of telephone surveys, adapting our methodology to conduct our first ever phone survey in September 2020, a pilot study in Namibia on the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have always prided ourselves in doing face-to-face surveys, but with the pandemic, we have now commenced with telephone surveys. And over the past 2 years, we have piloted various formats that we could do that.
Despite pandemic-related adjustments, data analysis, results dissemination, and other activities never missed a beat. Recognized as an innovator by the United Nations Volunteers, or UNV Innovation Challenge Fund, Afrobarometer modeled the economic and social contributions of volunteers to the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. In May 2021, we launched our SDG Scorecard series, contributing the perspectives of African citizens to the tracking of progress towards the goals, and underscoring our commitment to aligning our efforts with global development priorities and fostering citizen engagement in policy discussions. In January 2021, we achieved recognition as one of the best institutional collaborations involving 2 or more think tanks in the Global Go-To Think Tank Index. Pursuing our commitment to innovation, we hosted the first Barometer's Brown Bag webinar on telephone survey methods in collaboration with the Arab Barometer and the Latin American Public Opinion Project. We continued to develop outlets for sharing our findings and informing public discourse and policy debates, ranging from the Washington Post-Monkey Cage blog to high-level forums in Africa, Europe, and the United States, and a weekly data series on the continent, an award-winning online news publication. After a 7-month hiatus due to COVID-19, we successfully completed round 8 data collection in 34 countries, including our first survey in Angola, and by August 2021, we were ready for a record round 9 in 39 countries, and by January 2024 for a new record round 10.
Now we are at almost 40 countries covering most of the African continent. Over the years, we've basically expanded to include as many countries on the continent so that our data can represent fully the views of most Africans, because we are now covering about 80% of the population of the African continent. Of course, would love to include all the 54 countries on the continent, but that's something we are gradually building up to.
We also continued to expand our capacity building program, which over the years has trained hundreds of young researchers, civil society activists, journalists, parliamentarians, and members of the African Governance Platform through our French and English language summer schools, thematic workshops, mentorships, university outreach initiatives, and staff development fellowships. We lead the Data for Governance Alliance, a 4-year project to foster data-driven advocacy and collaboration between Pan-African civil society organizations and members of the African Governance Platform. With our partners, we are bolstering implementation of the African Union Agenda 2063 and the African Governance Architectures Agenda on democracy, governance, and human rights by equipping civil society with tools and knowledge to engage effectively with African governance architecture and national governments.
The data that we produce are made available free of charge to researchers, policymakers, civil society advocates, international development partners on the African continent and beyond.
Today, Afrobarometer stands as the premier non-partisan Pan-African research organization committed to tracking the experiences, evaluations, and perspectives of ordinary Africans on political, economic, and social developments. Headquartered in Accra, Ghana, our network comprises 37 national partners, including universities, research organizations, and NGOs. Our 3 core partners and technical support units at the University of Cape Town, Michigan State University, and the University of Malawi. To achieve our vision of a world in which Africa's development is rooted in the realities and aspirations of its people, we work to elevate citizen voices as a crucial component of policy and decision-making across Africa. Our core objectives include producing scientifically reliable data and analysis on public opinion, strengthening the capacity of African institutions for democratic governance research, and disseminating and applying democratic governance survey results.
The data that Afrobarometer produces, including the analytic insights that we generate, are all available to the public for free. We do this to ensure that the information that we generate and the insights that we create from the data is available to everybody who wants to access and use it to inform decision making. And this has been the biggest contribution of Afrobarometer to the policy space on the continent and beyond. And different policy actors at government level, civil society groups, research think tanks, both on the continent and outside of the continent, have consistently used the data as well as the evidence that they generate to inform decision-making in their own spaces. For Afrobarometer, we envision a world in which Africa's development is anchored in the aspirations and perspectives of ordinary citizens, that development on the continent is driven by what people's preferences are. And we will continue to do this for the next 25 years as we've done in the past 25 years.
Over the past quarter century, we have conducted more than 385,000 face-to-face interviews in 42 countries across all regions of Africa. Using a rigorous methodology described as the gold standard for surveys in Africa, our surveys now represent the voices of more than 3/4 of the African population.
So over the years, really, Afrobarometer methodology has become really the gold standard in terms of how to do surveys on the African continent. But as also a network, we are also constantly learning and refining our methodology.
We also want to be innovative so that we optimize our resources in the long run.
I think we need a lot more Afrobarometers as journalists. I mean, the quality of work, the authenticity of the work, and the scope of the work means that as a journalist, I am exposed to different experiences from different places. Now, this allows me to incorporate those experiences into my own situation as a Ghanaian and as a reporter. This gives me angles that sometimes under normal circumstances I would not think of. This gives me perspective that under normal circumstances I would not think of.
We disseminate our survey findings through a wide variety of channels, including briefings, publications, infographics, blog posts, and social media, resulting in thousands of news reports a year. The Ibrahim Index of African Governance, the United Nations Development Programme, the World Bank, the Economist Intelligence Unit, and others use Afrobarometer data to produce regional and global governance indicators. Government agencies, civil society organizations, media outlets, and academics across Africa and around the world rely on our data.
So I've had a pretty long experience with Afrobarometer. I started off using the data as a master's student at the University of Cape Town, and then I transitioned to assistant project manager for Southern Africa. AB's biggest achievement over the last 25 years is really getting African citizens to understand and value public opinion data. It has gone throughout the continent in more and more countries, creating Afrobarometer ambassadors wherever it goes, whether they're in universities or CSOs or even within government departments, so that it's really bringing this data to the people.
Surveys play a very central role in influencing government policy. We don't have any other body or agency or network that provides panel data each and every other 2 years. So this has really made Afrobarometer the pathway that for Africa engagement.
Les enquêtes Afrobaromètre jouent un très grand rôle. Tout dernièrement, j'étais un peu surpris de voir beaucoup de citations des données Afrobaromètre dans les données du ministère de l'administration territoriale. Et au ministère de l'économie et des finances, les résultats sont vraiment, il faut le dire, utilisés. J'ai participé tout récemment aussi à une activité de ce ministère-là où, pour les aspirations des populations, on a utilisé les résultats Afrobaromètre directement, au lieu de faire nous-mêmes une autre enquête de perception des aspirations et des doléances des populations.
Our proudest achievement is legitimizing public opinion as a pillar of African democracy. And as our journey continues to unfold, we will ensure that African voices continue to shape a brighter, more inclusive future for the continent.